Right, this is Jeff Person, president of the USAFL UA. Sid, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Sid Caesar. I'm the treasurer of the Umpires Association.
And April.
April Munn, the president of the USAFL.
All right, thank you so much. All right, today, May 12th, we're at our USAFL UA Umpire Association happy hour. And what we're going to do today, in addition, for those who are not there at the very first one, we're going to toast again to say, welcome everybody to the USAFL UA happy hour. Cheers, everyone. So for today, we're going to review a document that the USAFL has put together to put a lot more description around umpire abuse. And the reason for this is the AFL for several years now has pushed us to get more control over the stuff that happens on field and to a small degree off field, where umpires are being abused. And so the USAFL has come up with this document with a lot of input from the coaches forum, from several people from the Umpire Association side, as well as the remainder of the board of directors at the USAFL to say, what is the policy? What is the definition of abuse? How do we keep players from getting red cards and having to go through the process? But if they do, what is the process that they go through? And if they have to go through it because they broke the law, what are the penalties that they are facing? And so this is something that will give everybody from the coaches through the players, as well as all the umpires, and hopefully everybody else who's affiliated with any club, whether they're playing or not, an understanding of if you abuse an umpire and you get out of control, they're not going to decide it's one game or two games or five games or whatever it happens to be. It's already preset. If you go down this path, you already know what the penalty is going to be. So with that said, we're going to go through the definition, scroll down just a bit. As you can see here, it says it's Law 22 of the AFL Laws of the Game, and it's linked. So if you need to actually go to the link itself and review the law, that's the law that talks about what kind of things fall under the rubric of umpire abuse. And so what we're talking about is not just verbal, but any behavior, verbal, physical, or symbolic, that challenges or undermines or shows disrespect towards an umpire's authority, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, obviously. We know that players get rather emotional out on the field. Footy is a collision sport, not just contact, but it's collision. And everybody goes out there with the intention of winning a game. So if they don't like a particular call, they may have a reaction to it. And to a degree, that's okay, as long as they're within whatever we define as that degree. So we know that there's going to be frustration. We don't want to have any hostility. We want to make sure that the emotions that are on the field stay within the parameters that we're defining here. If we don't do that, the abuse can escalate, and that puts players at risk. If we don't do certain things, players may take into their own hands what they think should be happening from an umpire standpoint. If things aren't being called or something like that, they may decide to do something on their own, and it could potentially put another player or players at risk. So we need to make sure that we maintain the match management processes that we have in place and use those to manage the match and keep everybody safe. Scroll down just a bit. All right, you've also got a piece here about other appointed persons. And so it's not just the players who are on the field or the players and coach on the sidelines. It is the others who are affiliated with the team. It could be a water runner. It could be a fan who's abusing us. It could be the message runner, etc. Those are all players, are all people who are subject to disciplinary processes from the USAFL in order to keep the game clean. The other thing is, if you start in the middle of the paragraph, you can see it says, in the USAFL, this policy is applicable to all umpires, field boundary and goal, and umpire coaches. So as a reminder, and it's in the laws, any umpire can report, meaning you can issue, and then we have documentation for it, which we'll get to. But if you're the boundary umpire and somebody's giving you a bunch of crap, you can report them. Same with the goal umpire. We have umpire coaches now. We've got half a dozen of them or more as we keep accrediting them. You're the ones who are on the sidelines, and most of the time you're going to be within earshot of the teams that are on the boundaries. If there's a bunch of crap going on the sidelines, maybe the field umpires aren't picking it up because they're farther away and they can't hear it. You are also under this policy able to issue reports. So this is not a change in how umpires or what the ability of an umpire, whether in all these categories, it's not a change in the ability to issue a report. We're just bringing it more to the forefront and reminding everybody that this already exists, and we just need to make sure that we're using it as appropriate. So the ultimate decision on whether a player's or a club official's action constitutes abuse is left solely to the umpire's discretion. And that's where we have to make sure that we're doing the right things from our side. So keep scrolling down. Right. What is and is not acceptable? So we've got some definitions here on what is acceptable behavior. I'm not going to read them all because I know you can all read. There's examples in here for how do you show respect to an umpire? Say, may I ask what that free kick was for? What can I do differently? How did I get that? What can I do differently so I don't get penalized again? Those are examples of being respectful towards an umpire. All right, scroll down some more. Right, acknowledging the decision and walking away without further engagement. That is showing respect. Team captains or coaches are the only ones who are allowed to engage the umpires at the quarter or halftime break to discuss rules interpretation. So we don't want a whole bunch of conduct or conversation going on within the game. We want to make sure we're handling those things at a break. Right. Unacceptable behavior as we scroll down. So we've got things here about challenging or confronting the umpire's decision in an aggressive or abusive tone. And you see the example of yelling, swearing, etc. Persistent questioning after umpires have responded for a clarification. What was that for? It was because it was a push in the back. If they keep coming after you, that's persistent. Gestures or body language that express abuse. And you see there, throwing their arms up, shaking their head, exaggerated body movements. But I don't see this one too much. Clapping sarcastically, it does happen periodically. That's considered denigrating to umpires. And so we want to make sure we don't let that happen. And then there's indirect abuse. It says muttering, that's a joke. Other types of comments about that, especially when they know they're within earshot and they're saying it so that you hear it, but they're not looking directly at you. The snipe ball, verbal baiting, and eye rolling directed at the umpire in response to a call. These are all examples of things that are just saying, hey, the umpire is not a good umpire. I don't like what they're doing. I think they're making bad calls, etc. So these are the kind of things that we want to cut down on. And if you think about it, do you see a whole lot of this stuff going on at the AFL? Heck no, you don't see any of it going on at the AFL because they know they'll get in trouble if they do. The next to last bullet, intentional physical contact with the umpire. That might happen in a ball up situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's trying to make contact with you. But certainly if it's intentional and that's where your partner can help you out, somebody took a line of to get to you as an umpire and it wasn't really a good line toward the ball, that could be considered intentional physical contact with an umpire. And then physically approaching an umpire that could be interpreted as intimidating or threatening. So a player who is 6'5" goes out there and goes after or approaches the umpire who's 5'5". There's a big difference in size, and that could be an intimidating thing, trying to use the size, tone of voice, etc., to intimidate or threaten the umpire. That's something we really want to make sure doesn't happen. So at the bottom there, you see we pulled it in straight from law 22.2, and we highlighted D through K, which are the pieces that we are referring to in terms of what is umpire abuse. And so if anybody had any questions about, are we making this up? Or are we just trying to make life more difficult for them as a player or a coach? Nope. It's been in the laws. We're just bringing it to the forefront and we're telling everybody all we're doing is interpreting the laws. And then as umpires for the game, our job is to administer the laws. And here they are, and they're highlighted for you. Okay, scroll down some more. Okay, so we've gone through what is acceptable behavior and what are some examples of unacceptable behavior. So now what we have to do is figure out how do we administer this? And we've had a lot of discussion on the UA board. We've had it in the coaches group. We've had emails going back and forth about how do we use the different tools at our fingertips in order to manage the game. And so a lot of the feedback in the emails that I've had in the last week or so have to do with this first bullet here. And it's all about prior to the start of the game, all players may be warned of a zero tolerance policy. And so I believe that's what Sid was referring to pre-call in the match going on at in Virginia this last weekend. And it was talked about, reminding players there's a zero tolerance for umpire abuse. So that's the first warning. Some of the other umpires are telling me that when you have the players lined up, you just say the first warning is for umpire abuse is being given right now. In game, once we get started, you've already had your first warning because you've all been informed of it. So if you do something, it's going to go straight to a free kick and then a 50 and then a card if necessary. So those are the prior to the start of the game. You can use those in your pregame speeches to let players know how things are going to be administered during the game. So the other pieces, scroll down just a bit. So the other pieces that we want to make sure of, back down just a hair. Yep. So using clear communication, being respectful and consistent. So that is something we should always be doing, whether it's for umpire abuse or not. If it's just explaining, I paid the mark because of X. I paid the infringement because he had two hands in the back and gave a push. Being clear, being respectful, right? Not raising your voice, not showing the players disrespect. Like, how could you think that wasn't a free kick? Like going back at them, right? That's disrespectful. Just be respectful at all times. Using please and thank you. Hey, please come back 2 meters from that mark. Thank you. So those are things you should be doing. We've also got in here concise language. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time explaining things. I like to keep things as simple as possible, using the KISS theorem. Keep it simple, silly. So if the ball is near the goal line, I'm just going to use this as an example, and you're explaining it to somebody, why was that a behind? Well, the whole ball went over the whole line at the behind line, therefore it's a behind. So it's simple, short, concise explanations. Whole ball over the whole line. Can be also on the boundary line, the whole ball over the whole line. Just an example of something, keep it simple without having to go into a long explanation of why something was being called. All right, so some of the tools we have available, verbal warning. So if somebody's mad at themselves and drops an F-bomb that I can't believe I had an effing stupid kick like that, they're obviously not mad at you. They're not mad at their teammate. They're not mad at their opponents. They're mad at themselves. So you might say, hey, language. We don't want to get, we don't want to have to do anything silly from uh, uh, with a player doing being mad at themselves, especially if they're not yelling at the top of their lungs. Just give them a quick verbal warning. Hey, make sure that you keep the language clean. Per Rule 1813, free kick shall be awarded against a player engaging in the unacceptable behavior. So that's our next step, is a free kick. So somebody doesn't like that a ball up was called, and they say, they turn to you and say, how could you possibly call that? Bang, whistle, free kick, verbal abuse. That's pretty easy. And I'm pretty sure that if you award that early in the game, 17 other players wearing that same color from that player are going to help you as an umpire to administer the law because they don't want to give away free kicks. They don't want their teammates giving away free kicks. So they will help you in terms of game management. So one of the things that I do in my personal pregame to myself, what do I want to work on as an umpire when I take the field? My first bullet point for me to work on every single time is pay the first infringement, no matter how soft. Because if I blow my whistle and I start blowing my whistle to pay infringements, players know you're there, you're watching, and you're gonna blow your whistle. So for me, if I see something I got to pay a free kick to 5 minutes, 2 minutes into the game for verbal abuse or just doing something stupid, boom, do it. You've set the precedent for the rest of the game. The next step up is the 50. So you've already given away a free kick. You've already awarded a free kick for a mark or for infringement, and then something else happens. Well, you can't give a free kick because there's already one that's been awarded. So that next step up would be the 50-meter penalty. And in this case, I guarantee you 17 other players are going to help you with administering the verbal abuse stopping the verbal abuse from their team. And then the last one, which is the red and yellow cards, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail here in a second. And that's the ability for the field umpire to send off. So the yellow card is the cool down, and the red card is the report for an ejection, a report which goes to tribunal. All right, scroll down a bit. As a reminder, yellow card, which is the caution. Player leaves the field for 15 minutes of game time and may be replaced. I say may because they don't have to be. They're allowed to be replaced. And then from the yellow card, you also have a free kick and a 50-meter penalty that goes along with the yellow card. The red card is the player is removed from the game. The team may not replace the player for 15 minutes of game time. So it's 5 minutes to go in the first half. The replacement player doesn't get to come on until 10 minutes into the second half. Player is mandatorily remanded to tribunal review, and that's all covered down below. Every card equals a report, yellow or red, is a formal report and submitted to the USAFL via the caution ejection form at the field. We always have those at the field. They're at the tent. The caution is for the yellow, obviously, and the ejection is for red. If you have any questions or need any help with this form, there's usually a bunch of us out there have had the unfortunate privilege of filling these things out, and we know what to do. So always, if you have a card, immediately after the game, go and get that filled out. For non-players, club officials, etc., there's an equivalent of a red card. We have a document for that, for a non-player to be remanded to a tribunal from the league perspective. So that's where the message runners, water runners, etc., can be reported if they've done something that warrants that getting them taken care of. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll down. All right. So as you see here, even with the yellow card, it's going to go to the league and they're going to look at it with that caution ejection form that you complete. You'll say it's a yellow card if it's just getting them off for 15 minutes to cool them down. If it's a full red card, then it's a full report and so on and so forth. The red card, as you see there, it's got the reference for the incident classification. So umpire abuse is a non-classifiable offense. So there is no early plea option. And you'll see this down below in the rest of the document. We talk about when they get to this point, because they were just out of control and you had to red card them, they don't get to early plea and plea down and et cetera, et cetera. They're going to go down this table here and they're going to get punished, assuming they are found guilty at the tribunal. Pretty hard to believe somebody's going to get found not guilty. If they've gotten as far as getting a red card for verbal abuse or abusing an umpire, I find it very difficult to believe they're going to be able to be found not guilty. Scroll down some more so we can get to the table. We're now in Play HQ, starting right now with the league. And so that means that going forward, every player's history is going to be public. So if anybody gets a red or yellow card, it goes into their permanent record. And we're starting with last year's nationals. So there were, I can't remember, I think it was 11 cards were issued, something like that. 5 of them were for umpire abuse. So those 5 players are already on this table for having a history of umpire abuse, for being reported for umpire abuse. If you have no disciplinary record and the player is found guilty, then the player is suspended for a minimum of 1 game. If you have an existing disciplinary record, not limited to umpire abuse, it could have been for striking or something else, the player is suspended for a minimum of 2 games. And as you see here, you read through this, it says the player must also complete the AFL vilification and discrimination online course. If they don't do that, they cannot compete again in the USAFL until that course has been completed and the documentation is submitted to the USAFL. If they have an existing disciplinary record for umpire abuse, the player is suspended for a minimum of 1 year. So I'm going to pause right there so everybody can go, holy cow, a whole year? Yep, a whole year. So if you're a coach, and I know some of us on this call are, if you have a player who gets out of control and they do it a second time, bye-bye. Everybody's been warned. This is in play. I don't see any reason for the league to back down ever on something like this. It's going to be very I can't even imagine the circumstances where a player is going to be able to get out of this. Now, it was raised on the coaching call a couple weeks ago that, well, what if the previous record was 8 years ago and they've had a clean record for 8 years? Well, too bad. You're suspended for a year. However, I did say that on the tribunal, I'm not saying the tribunal will do this or even could do this or should do this, but the tribunal could look at something and say, you know what? This player has been playing and has played 150 games in the last 8 years, and they've had a clean record, and they finally had something like this. Maybe they'll do something like, hey, you're going to be suspended for a year, but we're going to put that suspension on hold. We're going to pend it. You better be clean for yet another year, because if you get anything else and not just limited umpire abuse, we're going to reinstitute the whole year of suspension. I can see something like that in, I don't want to say it's an impossible case. It's theoretically possible that something like that might happen. So short of something like that, for us as umpires, we should know that if we put red cards out there for umpire abuse, this is what the player is going to be facing. Automatic 1 game, if no record, no umpire abuse, automatic 2 games, which means in a tournament, they're pretty much done for the weekend or longer. And then if it's somebody who already has an umpire abuse history, it's gone. They're just gone. We won't see them for a year. All right, let's scroll down.
Question on that.
Go ahead.
So is this including are these just nationals tournaments or how is this being recorded?
Nice segue. Go on to the next section.
All right.
This applies to the tournaments that are administered by the USAFL, which are the regional tournaments and the nationals tournament. The tournaments that are administered by clubs and the individual games that are hosted by clubs, I call them one-on-one matches. This does not necessarily apply as written, and part of that is because most of the umpires who work those games don't submit any paperwork. If they send somebody, whether it's a yellow card or red card in a local game or a local tournament, they don't do paperwork. They should, and there may be a day down the road where we as the Umpire Association mandate that happens. I would like it to happen, but we haven't mandated it. In that case, then this would apply. But if no paperwork is submitted, then there's nothing for the USAFL to review. So does this apply? Yes, it applies to the tournaments. So starting at the Northeastern Regional Tournament in Philadelphia next month, and there are other 3 tournaments after that and nationals. There is a category here for team discipline for umpire abuse. It applies to the specific team. So for example, if you have 2 men's teams, if it's happening on your D4 team or your women's 1 team, if you have another team that's competing for that club, those teams are not impacted. Only the team is impacted. So it's the players who are on that team. The individuals, and this is something that I wanted to make sure of because I didn't want anybody to find a loophole. Individuals who are on that roster for that game may not transfer between teams within a club until all disciplinary requirements are fulfilled. So if you've got somebody who gets a card, they are found guilty and they have to complete the course before they can be reinstituted. You cannot take somebody off that D4 team and put them up to a D1 or D1 down to a D4 team. That roster is locked. The individuals may not transfer. So those teams or those clubs that do a lot of moving their better players up and down to try and win 2 titles in a particular tournament are going to be hamstrung by this, and that's the intention. The maximum penalty will apply to the game in which the threshold incident occurs. You'll see that in the table below. The team discipline count will reset on a per tournament basis. So if one club has a team in the Northeast and then goes to the Western, you get a free pass, so to speak. You get to start over, and then you start over at nationals. If the team club discipline occurs in multiple tournaments within the same year, the executive board of the USAFL may take additional further disciplinary actions. And so having everything recorded in Play HQ gives them a really good line of sight to keep track of things that are happening. Even though it resets from tournament to tournament, we want to keep track of, are the same teams and clubs having issues over and over again? Do we need to do something about it? Okay, scroll down. All right, I won't spend a lot of time on this one because we're just about done. So individual player report, club or team as appropriate, because some clubs only have one team, gets a warning. And if it's a report for umpire abuse, same thing, they get a warning, right? You better be careful because you've got one already on record. You get a second player, gets a report, considered for individual disciplinary action, and the coach can also be considered for individual disciplinary action. And this is in the category for any. But if it's for umpire abuse, you have two players who have umpire abuse, that team forfeits that game. You can see how it's going to be recorded there. And the coach is suspended until completion of the AFL vilification and discrimination course, which can be done before their next game if they're smart and have a phone and get that done. But if that coach gets something like this and gets suspended, bye-bye, coach. You're the one who's supposed to be in charge of your team. Everything rolls up to you as a coach. You are responsible for your team, period. And if it gets to 3, then the coach is automatically suspended. The team will forfeit their game, and all members of the reported team will be required to complete the AFL vilification and discrimination course. So guess what? If you got players on your team that are getting down this pathway, and there's 3 of them at a tournament, it doesn't matter if you were the perfect, lady Bing winner, if you know hockey, you could be in the perfect gentleman or perfect lady the entire time, and you still have to do this course because your team got out of control. Your team will not be in good standing and will not be able to participate in the USAFL until all team members are compliant. Coach is suspended for a minimum of 2 games. I really hope this never, ever, 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 ever happens. I really don't want this to happen. I'm glad it's there, but I really hope we never have to implement that. And then the last bit down there is just saying, hey, just as a letting everybody know, it's public. You get down this pathway and you go back to Australia, your report is going to be seen by the club you play with in Australia. If you come from Australia and you have a background because you're already in Play HQ, guess what? We can see it. So the USAFL, as of this year, is now in line with everything else in Australia. So this is going to put us in a really good place as the Umpire Association to really make sure that if we do what we need to do in terms of using our tools, hopefully we'll never get more than maybe a single card for somebody getting out of control for umpire abuse. All right, so there you have it. That's the policy. It's posted on our website. It's posted on the USAFL's website. If you look at the chat, April has posted the link up there for you if you want to go and grab it and download it. So this is a policy that is in play now. You can see the effective date. And going forward, I said this on the pre-call, I expect every single umpire, whether they're field boundary goal or coach, to know this policy, to know the tools that are out there, to know how to use the tools to do match management. If you have any questions, talk to me, talk to one of their coaches. If you're a boundary and you haven't done field, talk to the field umpire. If you're a goal, same thing, talk to the field umpire, talk to a coach on the game. Find out what you need to do if you're not the field umpire in order to be aware of this policy, and if there's a piece that you need to administer, because the play's upfield and somebody's giving the goal umpire a bunch of crap and you need to report them because they're swearing at you, that's something you should do. Verbal abuse of an umpire. It doesn't say verbal abuse of the field umpire. Verbal abuse of an umpire is a reportable offense. So in terms of umpires knowing this policy and then knowing the tools and using the tools that we can use to control it for match management, this is now an even bigger, it's on the list, but it's kind of not there. It's really going to be much more formal in terms of the accreditation process. If something comes up on one of your games, you're not doing this properly, you're letting a whole bunch of stuff go, and then you're not using your cards or not paying free kicks when a bunch of stuff's going on field and it's in your game report from a coach, you may not get your accreditation because you're not doing proper match management. So I expect every umpire on this call or not to have read this policy, to understand it, to know the tools, to know how to use the tools, and to I may actually send out an email saying, please email me directly when you have read this document so that I know that you are going to be somebody I can put on field for games at regionals and nationals. I won't do that this year, but I might do that going forward. It's that important that we administer this policy properly. All right, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let everybody else jump in and start talking about their thought processes on this.
So if there's a team, you're umpiring in a game, and you're aware of prior events. Are you suspending the game in the middle if an event, if a and forfeiting the game to the other team and leaving, or how's that?
No. If you have whether you know about a prior or not, doesn't apply in game. Somebody abuses you as an umpire, and you say, "I have to give you a red card because of what you just did." You then, after the game, immediately after, tell player so and so and that coach so and so, number whatever it is, has been reported for umpire abuse. They're going to go to tribunal. I'm going to the umpire tent to do my report right now and giving it to the USAFL. And then you're done unless they call you to the tribunal. The USAFL then takes that document, the caution ejection form that you complete. They will do the tribunal as appropriate. They may need to call you there to provide if the player's trying to fight it, then they have to go through the whole tribunal process. You may have to say what happened and you may get called to report at the tribunal. And then based on the outcome of that tribunal, then the league will say, okay, well, this falls into this category, therefore the team is going to forfeit the game. So that what you just described, that won't happen until after the game is over and you're long gone.
Now, one other thing I just wanted to bring up is I see umpire abuse of other field umpires on the field that aren't making the call. And I think the expectation is if you see it happening to another umpire, you should also call that as well.
I'm glad you raised that point because that is what I expect out of my coaches. I expect senior umpires and coaches to be helping their junior umpires. Absolutely. That is a part of the accreditation process. It is an expectation and it's part of the evaluation process I go through when we're looking at who is deserving of reaccreditation or moving up the accreditation ladder. If you're a senior umpire and you let your junior umpire get abused, that's on you.
Yeah.
We do not want that happening. We want to help, and we're not trying to turn our shoulders and close ourselves off to everybody else. What we're trying to do is be there to help our junior umpires learn to be better umpires. If you need to throw a card because somebody did something and you're 50 yards away, I don't care. If you saw it, you get to card it. Maybe it's just a free kick, it doesn't have to be a card, but if you saw it, you can call it. Just because you're not the number one umpire, you're the number two umpire, or in the case of a three, if you're the number three umpire, it doesn't matter. If you see it or you hear it, you can apply the tools to take care of it. I appreciate that question. That's a really good one. So I'm glad that's on our recording.
Jeff, I've got a couple of quick questions. One follows on from T-Bone's question just now. We've talked about the role or the responsibility of not just the second umpire to report, but also goal and or potentially boundary umpires to report. My question is about the impact of that on the flow of the game. Let's take, for example, a boundary umpire or a goal umpire is a witness to egregious umpire abuse, whatever that might mean. How can we empower them to be able to connect with the field umpire to communicate that if the play is starting to move the other way and attention's in the other direction? Can we put a whistle in the mouth of the goal umpire, or is that left for a report after the game? Is there opportunity to kind of deal with it on the moment rather than deal with it later?
Another fantastic question. So having been a boundary umpire who's issued reports at the International Cup, I can tell you exactly how this works. I've got other goal umpires over the years who have had reports from crap happening behind play. So it's not new to the USAFL for our non-field umpires to do reports. I've done it as a coach. I've reported somebody on the sideline for getting out of control. So here's how that happens. If you're not the field umpire, you can't send somebody off, right? If you're any one of the other umpire categories, what you do is you make note of what's happening. Number so and so from Nashville, myself, number 13 from Nashville, right? Whether it's a verbal abuse of an umpire or it could be struck another player, you're still allowed to report. You just can't send them off. So at a break, it could be if we had games with water breaks, it could be there. The ball gets smashed through and they're chasing a ball down, and there's a field umpire near you. Get their attention. If you can't, wait till the end of the quarter, wait till the end of the half, or it happens to be late in the game, the end of the game, and then you got to get the field umpire's attention and say, I've got a report. Because then the field umpire will go with you to the coach to say, number 13 from Nashville, you're the coach. Number 13 has been reported for whatever it's been reported for. So you don't stop the game. We're not going to put a whistle in anybody else's mouth. Boundaries have the whistle, obviously, but they're not going to stop the game for this. But the idea is that you need to make sure you know what's happening. Okay, 5 minutes to go in the game. Number 13 for Nashville, struck, number 6 for Columbus, right? At the point where you can, at a break, you can get that to the field umpire's attention, And then after the game, and you've notified the coach, then you, as the reporting umpire, will need to go to the tent, get the document, the caution ejection form, and complete it. And then if you need help with that, obviously, get help. And then it'll go from there as appropriate.
So there's no real opportunity to bring into play a free kick or a 50 or whatever on the spot.
Nope, only the field umpires get to do that. It's just the way the rules are written.
Okay.
Now, one thing we need to do, follow on to that question, so I'm glad you asked it for 2 reasons. That was one, the explanation about how it works. The other is, and I'm going to throw this out to my senior goal umpires, and I got 2 of them on here, Sid and Dan. I want to make sure we're running a seminar for our goal umpires to let them know, especially as part of the accreditation process, how that needs to work. Because I've talked to goal umpires on games I've been on where they say, well, the whole game they're abusing me and blah, blah, blah. It's like, why don't you tell me that? We could have reported them. It's right. So what we need to do is get to our goal umpires a virtual clinic and include as part of that their rights as goal umpires in terms of how what they can report and how they need to report it if it happens. And that way they can feel empowered and hopefully won't lose any goal umpires for having to put up with crap from players behind play. So I put that to my senior umpires, goal umpires. So thank you, Daz. I appreciate that. Another question? Because that was just one. You said you had a couple. You're on mute, Daz.
I'm sorry. I also had a question messaged to me by Brian Verbacek, who had to jump off the call. Not referring to umpire abuse. It's more of a general umpiring question. Would that be appropriate now?
Sure.
Okay. So in the instance of a player taking a mark right on the boundary line, the mark is awarded. The person on the mark has basically got 1 foot on the boundary line at that point, and the player who took the mark backs up. Now, if they are proceeding to the point to take a kick and they're going directly from where they started, kicking over the mark, is there any instance where that should be called out of bounds when they kick?
I know there's a few field umpires on this call who can help me with this answer, but I'll just take it. If I get anything wrong, jump in, guys. It doesn't happen a lot when a player has to back up out of bounds to take a free kick, but it does. And it's not frequent, but it does happen. So the purpose of setting them on their line between the center of the goal through the mark is to give them a line. In the field of play, what happens if they step off their line? You call play on, right? Same thing applies when they're out of bounds. If they approach the mark and then kick, everything's fine. 2 things are an exception to that. They backed up, they're standing, they're trying to decide where they're going to kick. They decide they're not going to kick directly over the mark. They're going to do something towards the middle of the field. They turn, approach the line, and kick. that's okay. They can do that. If they stop before they have crossed the line into the field of play, it is play on, out of bounds, ball up, or throw in. Because they played on, they stopped. You don't call play on when they come off their line. You call play on once they've stopped. They haven't gotten back on field yet, but they stopped because ooh, that's not a good idea. I'm not going to kick to him. I'm going to change my mind. So they stop, right? If they start their approach for their kick and then mid approach, they come off their line and they're still out of bounds, that's an immediate play on and a ball up for or a ball throw in for that because they played on and the ball's out of bounds. So, and I've had that happen. I've literally called that in the International Cup Grand Final. Nobody on the field except for the other field umpire knew what was going on. I had to explain it to the Irish captain why that was a free kick going against them. And when I explained it, he's like, "Oh God, I didn't even know that was a rule." It's like, "Yep, it's a rule." So, does that make sense about using the setting the player on their mark, and then if they come off it mid approach, it's an automatic play on, and then dead ball because it's out of bounds. But they can start their approach towards the line. It's just if they do that, they cannot change from there. They have to keep going until they're on the field of play. In which case, they're on field, you just call play on. Now it's regular play. Make sense?
Yeah, so they start their on their runway either to go and kick over the mark, or they at that point at the start of the runway they turn towards the field and make their way onto the field directly. They're good to go. But if they kick it after they're out of bounds.
Yep. If they start their approach and then if they don't, it has to be continuous. If they start their approach, they got to keep going until they kick the ball in.
So commit
If
one
they
way or the other.
If they stop or they decide to change directions, it's play on, balls out of bounds, throw in.
Okay.
I'd say it doesn't happen a whole lot, and it's not even going to happen once a game. It's probably less than that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great example of a level 2 advanced accreditation rule. If you know that and it happens to your game and you apply it, that's the kind of stuff we look for advanced accreditation.
We have some additional information from a very old umpire.
Yes, our very old umpire is going to add some commentary.
Well, not really. I mean, just to clarify, the mere fact that the player turns and faces the field of play without having moved doesn't mean you call play on. Just that only arises in the circumstance that Jeff described, where they start their run, then stop, change direction. So.
Right.
But I have one for you.
Sure.
Player takes a mark or is awarded a free kick and is taking a shot for goal from directly behind the mark. Commences the run, drops the ball, and completely misses it with his kick. What's the call, if any?
Completely misses their kick.
Completely misses the ball.
I'm going to throw that. I have my answer, but I'm going to throw that out there to some of the other field umpires out here. I'm going to call on Scott because he hasn't said anything yet. Scott, what would you do in that case?
So a player's lining up to kick a goal, runs in, goes through their kicking action and drops the ball while kicking. I call that
drops it towards their foot and fails to make contact. And this is not a feint. It's not a deliberately missing the ball. They just missed the ball.
Yeah. I call that action play on. So the ball's live.
Okay.
Play on would be my call as a field umpire.
Anybody else want to jump in? The not quite an old umpire is on mute. I can see him trying to say something.
No, I'm just waiting to see what others think.
Improper disposal.
Yeah, but that would mean that if you're bouncing the ball and it doesn't come back to you, then that's improper disposal?
Deliberate.
Insufficient. Insufficient intent.
But the player's not being tackled.
Exactly.
I mean, Laurie and I disagreed about this mildly. And by the way, it didn't happen. He actually stubbed the ground and actually just managed to touch the ball, but it raised the question of, amid a lot of laughter, as to what would happen if he'd actually completely missed the ball. My take on it is that nothing happens. He can pick it up and take the kick.
Insufficient.
Laurie was of the opinion that it's play on. I'm not convinced that it's a play on call there.
So you would allow the player to reset at that point?
Yeah, because nothing's happened. I don't think anything has happened that would justify a play on call. But as I say, I've never seen it, but it did make us think. But so I don't know. Jeff, you can make the ruling.
My initial response would be when they attempt the kick, right? The attempt is there, so it's a play on.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
what
that's
Laurie?
reasonable. But anyway, it was an
Yeah,
interesting one.
yeah.
So,
What,
hey,
what was Laurie's take? Just out of curiosity.
Laurie's initial take was that it would be play on. I think, I don't know. As soon as you call play on, of course, the player on the mark is allowed to move over the mark. If you don't call play on, then, and the player does move, sees the player's dropped the ball or has missed the ball with the kick and says, oh, fair game, and you haven't called play on, then technically you've got to give a 50-metre penalty.
So Steve, what same scenario? I'm on my line and I go to handball and I completely miss the handball, but my action is a full handball.
Right.
What's the call?
Well, there, I think it's similar in the sense that you go to handball, you haven't deviated from your line. It's the deviation that gets the play on call, or the actual completion of the handball. If you miss it, I guess you could argue that that's incorrect disposal.
yeah.
Ross,
So let me ask you this then. Are you saying that again, this is good happy hour chat, by the way, completely off topic, but hell, why not? Are you saying then that a player could then approach, take his 10-step run up, act like he's about to take the kick, decide, screw it, I'm not quite comfortable, and then stop and go back and back up 10 yards and try his kick again? I think
Well,
I think the argument is that once you've engaged in the act of taking your kick, any motion from that point on is going to be play on. And so I think I lean towards play on as opposed to, because I don't want people saying, oh, never mind, I'm going to back up again and try have 3 shots at a good run. You don't have people having 3 attempts at a run up.
Right. Well, no, I think that's reasonable. I think that's certainly very plausible.
They run out of time though in that instance.
Yeah, what happens? I mean, we're not quite the same as the AFL, where there's the time limit on you taking your kick. If you start your run and you're still within the time, and you stop and take 2 steps back, is the umpire going to call play on? I haven't seen it. I don't know.
I'm going to do that in my next game just to see what happens. That assumes I'm going to actually get a free kick, of course.
Well, that's not going to happen. But yeah, so it is. I mean, and that could happen. I mean, missing the ball completely, you wouldn't think that'll happen. But a player stopping in mid-run and saying, "Oh no, I'm too close to the man on the mark. I got to back up a bit." That could conceivably happen.
Yeah.
Maybe
Isn't this settled case law back in AFL? I mean, this must have happened a gazillion times.
In the
The AFL.
I don't know. It may have done. I don't know. But of course, I tell people not to watch the AFL because they'll only get confused.
All right. So before we
I tell you,
move on, I'm gonna share something, and so hopefully everybody can read this. It's one of the things I get from my wife.
if you stop moving,
I'm crazy because I like it.
very good.
I'm gonna start wearing these shirts to these happy hours, and got about 6 or 8 of them at this point. So I get these every year for my birthday from my wife.
Speaking of clothing, I would like to compliment Mark Gall on his choice of headgear this evening.
Where's Mark?
You can see the headgear. You can see the Cooper.
Can't see what he's wearing.
Uh-oh, Dallas Stars.
Oh.